right? So it's easy when we read these passages to look at them and be like, oh, he says to like hate your mother and hate your father and hate your brother and sister. It's like a metaphor for something. You know what a metaphor is? Like, it's like a picture of something else. Like, it shows you, it's imagery to help you understand something else. So it's just a metaphor for something. He's just trying to like get something across, And when in reality, though, we have to look at this first. Before we assume that, we have to understand that Jesus said some stuff and he meant it literally. And so if that's what he meant here, we have to check that out. So when Jesus is saying hate your mother, is he using a metaphor? Well, let's take a look at this passage that we're going to read through. We're going to start in Luke 14, verse 25. It should be up on the screens for you guys. So it says, now great crowds accompanied him, and he turned and said to them, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, desiring to build a tower, does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish. Or what king, going out to encounter another king of war, will not sit down first and deliberate whether he is able with 10,000 to meet him who comes again? Think, right? Well, he doesn't mean we have to like completely push them out of our life, right? So I wanted to look. So I looked up what hate, how that translates into the Greek, because this was originally written in Greek. And so in the Greek, the word that is used is miseo. Say that with me. Miseo. Nice. So that word, so I was like, all right, so it's miseo. So what does that literally translate to? Like, what's the definition of miseo? And if you look it up, it literally translates to I hate. Like, to actively hate something. It's used in other contexts throughout the Bible when it's like directed towards something that you just cannot stand. And that's the same word that Jesus uses here. So it's like, all right, so he's using this word, and that's a little tough. So I want you to think of things that you actually hate. So like, it might be like a food, right? It might be like a food. So like, is there anybody here that like genuinely hates vegetables? There's a few people. Okay, all right, good. I just had to make sure. So it might be vegetables. It might be some other kind of food, right? Or maybe it's like a TV show. Like, for example, a TV show that I actually hate is The Outer Banks. I cannot stand that show. But like, I have a sister that just graduated high school, and she loved it. And like, so that was like my closest demographic. That was my closest group of people to see who watches it. But I was like, I just can't stand this show. Or maybe it's something more serious, right? So maybe it's like racism. Maybe you hate racism. That's good. You should. Or sexism. Maybe you hate sexism. And the thing is, when you think of these things, they're things that you absolutely just cannot. He was going to die. He was going to be killed. He was going to be put up on a cross for crimes and for things that people have said that just are not true, or that people perceive him to be. But they're going to kill him. So when he was going to be put up on his cross, he had to carry this cross through the streets as people spat on him and yelled at him and told him that he wasn't the Messiah and that he's not a good person. They're just constantly badgering him. And so Christ has to openly carry this thing that is shameful to everybody else, but it's something that he is proud of. Because although he's going to die and it's not going to be good, and it's still hard for him to die because he is a man. He's going to do it because it means salvation. It means life for everybody else. So he's going to do it. So like, that is what it is. So it's for you to carry something that everybody else might think is shameful, but that you are proud of, right? So many of you know that I like Cane's, right? Oh, good. Nobody like badgered me. Thank you. And so nobody badgered me. But Alan loves Chick-fil-A, right? So all the time, Alan's giving me a hard time about Chick-fil-A, So Cane's is like my cross that I have to carry, right? My burden. I know people might not like the Cane's, but I'm willing to put it on my back, and I'm willing to carry it proudly, okay? And I want people to know that I like canes, and I have no problem with that, all right? But when in reality, though, like, that is what it looks like to carry your cross. It's to bear something proudly. And so the next verse he then talks about is counting the cost. Has anybody heard that phrase before, counting the cost? A few people, all right. So counting the cost is probably the most actually go and do the job they're supposed to do. And so imagine if a builder didn't do any of that, and he's like, I got some stuff in my truck, let's go build a building. And he drove up, and he's going to go put up the newest Raising Cane's in Stowe, and he goes to start building it, and then all of a sudden he can't finish it because he doesn't have everything he needs. And so he quits because, what am I going to do? I can't do anything. Well, all before that, he's been bragging to his friends, right? Like, I'm building a Raising Cane's right down the street, and I'm super pumped, and you guys are all going to have to come and see it when I'm done. And then he doesn't do it. And all of his friends make fun of him. And they're like, what do you think you're doing? Like, you said you were going to go build this, and now, like, it's not there? Like you can't stick to what you're going to do? And essentially, he's going to get made fun of, right? So let's put this in, like, a little bit of what we know, right? So let's think about starting a podcast, right? So, like, last year, I was part of a team that helped us start a podcast. And there's a lot that goes into it, but if you don't count that cost, it's not going to go well. So you have to think, like, I had to find people that were willing to be on it. I had to find content, like things we're going to talk about, and so I talk about movies on my podcast, so I had to watch movies every week, which is a big burden, but whatever. And then, also, like, I had to make sure that, like, I had the equipment and that I had a place to record and that I was able to do it each week, and it was all this stuff. And honestly, it's hard. Like, it's a lot of time for not getting paid to do it. So, and the thing is, if I didn't continue to do it, like, I had been bragging to my friends months before about how I'm starting this podcast, they're just going to sit there and make fun of me, kind of thing. So you have to push forward. And so what Christ is saying is, if you don't count the cost, if you don't hate your mother and father, you're not going to be able to be a Christian. That's what he's pointing to here. And so the last part of what this is saying is that if you don't count the cost and you don't renounce everything, so not even the people in your life, you truly count the cost, Christians should be unashamedly living for Christ first. Should be living for Christ first. So we looked at what did Jesus say. So now we have this picture of this is exactly what the words that came out of his mouth, or at least the English translation of it, right? So now we want to see, now what did he mean by that? What did he mean by those words that he said? And so we have to do what is called interpretation. We have to interpret what he's doing. And so in reality, these truths are hard. And it just is easy to ignore the truth, but being able to understand and grasp it, that's what makes it better. So what we have to do is we have to look at this from the point of view of the original writers. So at the time, it was Jews that were around, all right? So I want you to imagine right now that both your parents are Jewish, okay? And maybe somebody in here, that's the reality of it, okay? But maybe imagine both your parents are Jewish, okay? And so at that time, if you went up to your parent and you're like, hey, like, there's this Jesus guy that's in town, and I think he's the Messiah. Like, you've been telling me about this guy, and like, I think he's him, so I think I'm going to follow him. If your parents heard you say that at this time, they would have kicked you out of the house with nothing, and they would have told you that you are not actually a Jew and that you can't live with them anymore if you choose to follow this guy. So what do? Do you be like, all right, sorry, Mom, sorry, Dad, like, I'll stay with you, I won't follow this Jesus guy? Or do you decide to follow? Because in reality, Jews didn't think that Jesus was truly the Messiah that they were promised. But yet, the people were following him. And so, if you said that to your parents, they wouldn't be happy. And so, at the time, they were counting the cost. Remember, counting the cost. That's what I want you to remember. Counting. Maybe they would be excited. Would they be sad? Would they be mad? And in reality, you have to understand that when you follow Christ, like, you can't hide that. So that's the bearing the cross thing that Christ was talking about. So when you become a Christian or you choose to follow Christ, everybody's going to know. So I want you to imagine, like, I give you, if you leave today and you say you're a Christian, like imagine I hand you a t-shirt that says, I love Christ first before everybody else, or something along those lines. I will follow him always, or something like that. And it says on the front and the back. If I told you to put that shirt on and you had to wear it at school the next day, would you do it? Or would you be like, let me take a sweatshirt and like throw this on so like nobody actually has to like see what I'm wearing? Or like think about how your friends would react. Would your friends be like, yo, like, bro, you should cover that up kind of thing. Like nobody wants to see that, you know? Like, or how would your parents react in that situation? And in that situation, you would have to count the cost. Would you rather wear a shirt that shows everybody that you're proud to be a Christian, or do you value your parents' opinions, your friends' opinions, your own opinion more than Christ? That's the cost that you have to count, all right? And so, when we count the cost, you have to consider if you are willing to follow Christ. And when you do that, you might say, well, obviously, I'll do that. But what Christ keeps going in and saying is like, no, like, I'm serious. Like, you have to renounce everything. Like, nothing is worth more than me. And you have to actively acknowledge that. You have to know that, and you have to live like that. And so, in many ways, you know, like, it's Luke Skywalker, right? Who likes Star Wars? Show of hands. Don't be ashamed, okay? Star Wars is cool now. Yoda, right? But then he hears that his friends are in trouble, and he's like, I'm sorry, I got to leave. I got to go save my friends. And Yoda's like, you're not ready. If you go do this, like, you're going to make a fool of yourself. And Luke didn't listen, and he goes, and he gets his hand cut off, and he figures out that Darth Vader is his father. So, sorry, I know, the movie's 40 years old, but if you didn't know that already. But I'm not saying your hand's going to get cut off. It might. I'm not going to promise that it won't. But, you know, it probably won't. But in reality, as a Christian, we have to count that cost. You have to see, are you truly ready to give up everything that you hold close, that you hold dear, for Christ? Are you willing to say that he is more and everything else is less? And so this passage is saying a lot. I've said a lot of words that have come out of my mouth. So I'm going to do my best to summarize this for you a little bit. So it's saying that you have to hate your father, mother, brothers, sisters, siblings, right? And in reality, what Christ is saying is that you love him this much. This is how much you love Christ. And your love for your parents is down here. And so when in comparison, your love for Christ is so great that it's like the equivalent of hating your mother and father. And it's the reality, is that is how much you have to love Christ. You're like, all right, so I get it. Like Christ said that I have to hate my mom and dad, and if I want to be a Christian, you know, I gotta hate them. So this is what's gonna happen after I leave midweek this week, right? Like, sorry mom, sorry dad. You know, like that's not what I'm saying. We're gonna keep going a little bit with that. But what I'm going to encourage you to do is that you have to count the cost and abandon worldly things. So I want you to see, when we count the cost, our love for Christ should be so great compared to our love for anyone else. Compared to our love for anyone else. All right? Our love for Christ is up here, and our love for we've seen what he said, we've seen what it means. So this last part, what are we supposed to do with this? Right? What are we supposed to do with what Christ said? All right? And so, this is where things get tricky, right? Because most of us in this room, our parents probably are not Jews, so we're probably not going to get kicked out of the house if we say that we want to be a Christian, if we want to follow Christ. But we're still called to have this kind of love. And so, my simple answer for you is to count the cost. And I've been saying that a lot. Count the cost. But ask yourself very seriously, is Christ your all? Is Christ your all? And I want you to think, like, if you tell your parents that you would rather read the Bible than have dinner with them, what would they say? Would they be offended? Would they be mad at you? If they told you if you told them that it was more important for you to go to church than it was to go to breakfast with them that morning, How would they feel? Would they be sad? Would they be mad? And the thing is, I'm not saying here to be like, well, I'm going to go over to my friend's house for a sleepover, and my friend's a Christian, so if my mom tells me I can't go, like, boo-hoo, Mom, I get to go because they're Christian. I'm going to grow closer to Christ. That's not what I'm saying at all right? It's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that if your parents tell you that your value for them should be greater than Christ, that's when you choose Christ. It's not in those everyday things like that, because if you're not supposed to go to sleep over at somebody's house, honor your parents. We're also called to do that too. That's okay. You can miss one sleepover. But if your parents are telling you, I don't want you to fall like Christ fellow, or if your girlfriend or your boyfriend says, I don't want you being around like those church people or whatever. I don't want you to follow Christ and think that he's the most important thing. That's when the red flag should pop. That's when this love gap, that's when that comes into play. Okay? When your best friend is going to leave, you're never going to see them again, and it's your last chance to share the gospel with them, to tell them about Jesus. What do? You tell them about Jesus. That's what this passage is saying. That even if it's your mom's birthday, your boyfriend or your girlfriend's anniversary or whatever, even if you're going to have a new baby brother or baby sister, Christ is more important than all of those things. And this is a hard reality because we don't always want to say this. But there's a guy, all right? So some of you might know him, but Gather, so for our high schoolers, it's called Gather, and he's one of the leaders there. His name is Tyler, okay? So you might know him. You might have seen him if you come on Sunday mornings. He's super loud, and his laugh is like you can hear him all the way through the building, all right? But Tyler is an awesome guy, and in next July, he is leaving to go on mission to Portugal, okay? Which is awesome. Yeah, it is. And in reality, though, his parents are not down with it. They're basically telling him, if you go to Portugal, we're cutting you off from everything. You got to give us your car. We're not going to give you any money. If you're seeking support from people, we're not cool with that. So what does Tyler do? He goes anyway. He's still going to Portugal. Even though his parents are telling him that they don't want him to do it because they don't want him to pursue this mission, he's doing it anyway. That's what it looks like to actively live that hard reality. And sometimes it's tense with his parents. Sometimes it's tough. But what I'm going to say to you is that you don't abandon your parents. You don't tell them you don't want to be a part of them anymore. But when it comes to one of those decisions, it is a clear choice that Christ will always be first. All right? So this last point that I want you to write down is going to be up on the screen. So what should we do with what Jesus said? Count the cost and renounce anything worldly. Anything. Mother, father, brother, sister, boyfriend, girlfriend, books, movies, TV shows, phone, yourself. All of that is down here in your comparison of love for Christ up here. So last week, if you were here, we split off into small groups, all right? And to talk about a few questions. So we're going to do the same thing this week. So leaders, I didn't brief you all on this, but just break off with some students, do some smaller groups. The questions are going to be up on the screens, and then I will kind of wrap us up for the evening. So spread out around the room and kind of gather together. So I know that wasn't a lot of time, and you might not have finished the questions, but there's one thing I want to say before we wrap up for tonight. So there's been a lot of talk and a lot of word, you've heard the word hate a lot tonight, right? And it still might be confusing and it still might be weird to think about this concept of being you're supposed to hate these people that you love. And so you might be asking yourself, well, why should I love Christ so much more than I love my parents? And I'm going to tell you right now, it's because he first loved us. That he gave his life on the cross as a perfect man, a man that never sinned. He died the same way that a sinner should, so that we could be with him. And so that we could have an opportunity to be with him. And so, don't miss that. So when you go home with your parents, or whoever ends up comes to pick you up tonight, or whoever you go home to see, don't go up to them and be like, I learned I'm supposed to hate you. But go to them and say, and show them that you love them. But show them that you love Christ more. And maybe you're in here and you're hearing me say, right? So remember, count the cost and love Christ more than anything else. All right? I'm going to pray for us. Dear Lord, I thank you for these midweek students, that we get to be here and that we get to dig into your word, and that you've given us these tough passages and you've said these tough things so that we can sit here and wrestle with them and we can talk about them and we can figure out what it looks like to love you more. And Lord, help us to not take this passage in the wrong way, or to help us take it in a context that makes it seem like we're not supposed to love our parents. But help us become better by loving you more so that we can love our parents better. Lord, help us to count the cost. In your name I pray. Amen.